Good afternoon. My name is Akiko Takesue, Bishop-wide Committee Associate Curator of Japanese Art and Culture at the ROM. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the ROM sits on the ancestral lands of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Anishinaabeg Nation, which includes the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation since time immemorial to today. I'm delighted you could join us for today's Curator Conversation program in support of the upcoming online exhibition Aftershocks Japanese Earthquake Prints, which is co-presented by ROM and the Japan Foundation. So this exhibition highlights ROM's exceptional collection of an album of woodblock prints made in response to a large earthquake in Edo, today's Tokyo, in 1855. These prints present a unique platform to explore how humor and satire helped making sense of the aftermath of the natural disaster and connect with our own experiences with social media, as well as with the resilience of human and creative spirit in the face of ever-changing dynamics between nature, humans, and societies. Curator Conversation is a digital program that explores themes and subjects from ROM collections alongside industry professionals. We are delighted to be hosting this conversation during Media Literacy Week, an annual event hosted by Media Smarts promoting digital media literacy across Canada. During the program, I encourage you to submit your thoughts and questions in the Q&A feature, and there'll be an opportunity to answer some of these questions at the end. So I'm so excited to introduce you today's guest, Wes Tyrell. Wes has been president of the Association of Canadian Cartoonists since 2012, representing colleagues that draw for the nation's newspapers and magazines. Actually, ACC's annual conference was held at the ROM in 2016 for your reference. From his Toronto studio, Wes has been producing humorous and biting editorial cartoons and illustrations for over 20 years. Since 2014, Wes has been the cartoonist for Zoomer magazine in Toronto and has freelanced for clients including Maclean's magazine, the Globe and Mail, Yahoo, and the BBC. We will talk about the use of satire as a powerful and complex communication tool. So please join me in welcoming Wes Tyrell.
Akiko!
Yay.
Konnichiwa! It's a delight to be with you. I hope everybody's very happy about today's presentation down at the ROM because this is something to celebrate.
Thank you, Wes. So a little bit more about the online exhibition. Let me talk about it. So it's scheduled to be launched on the ROM website in the mid to late November. And it features about 45 prints out of 87 contained in that album I mentioned. And these prints were very popular at the time, and over 300 versions were produced within a short period of time of 2 months after the earthquake. And they are called catfish prints, namazu-e in Japanese. Why? Because catfish is a symbol of earthquake and believed to cause the big earthquake while living underground. So, and many prints depict catfish humorously, often half human. They use multiple layers of parodies and puns, as well as satires against the social condition of the time, such as the gap between the rich and the poor, or belief that the natural disaster was meant to happen to mend corrupted society. So Wes, we went through the album the few months ago together. What stood out for you when you saw these?
First and foremost, this sumptuous collection, and I encourage everyone who's viewing today and in the future to get down to the ROM and see these in person. What remarkable, beautiful, preserved pieces of cartoon art these are, in great condition. And it's in this book where whoever initially had this collection put them all in with great care and tenderness, and they're just delightful. They're funny, they're bizarre. There's some things that to a Westerner's eye you might not understand quite clearly, but it's just gorgeous stuff to look at. And of course, you're looking at it with a great bulk in your head of Western cartoon ideas. You can't help but think like, well, so that's how they were doing it in Japan. And at that time period, what were they doing in ways that we're more comfortable with? And in our case, Akiko, there was so many cartoons in the West, and in my case, in Britain, come from British family, like the great James Gilroy. James Gilroy was doing stuff. This is a few decades before, but it's also in the 19th century, showing the prime minister at the time, Prime Minister Pitt, with the everybody's favorite Napoleon Bonaparte, carving up the globe, which is a plum pudding for their own devices. And what's happening here is they're using this inanimate object, a plum pudding, to represent the earth. And when you're using a metaphor like this as a satirist, it's used as a communication tool. It's going to symbolize something. It's going to have an image that's very clear for the viewer to understand quickly. It can be an inanimate object, could be an animal, could be a mythological creature like the catfishes we've been discussing. And there's I believe the next slide demonstrating how when we can anthropomorphize animals or objects to sell the idea. Like Ron Hauge has done this fantastic drawing of a potato for Donald Trump and calling it the dictator. Beautiful stuff, really, really nice. And Donald Trump again on the left, from our good friend Steve Brodner in the United States. You can see in the basket, he's filling this balloon with belching his own hot air, is filling up the balloon with his nutty ideas. It's a gorgeous piece of artwork. Another good friend from Sacramento, California, Jack Oman, is literally turned Bernie Sanders into an alien spaceship to be encouraging Hillary on the campaign trail. And really, when you're talking about anthropomorphizing anybody, turning animals like the catfish, or in this case, cats, from Steve Bell at The Guardian, fat cats. It's a very common expression in the cartoon world to demonstrate the people in big business who have lots of money, maybe some zany ideas. And we'll finish again with Steve Bell, where he has, well, literally turned Donald Trump into a toilet and is representing his hair by a golden toilet seat. It's just a remarkable piece of satire.
That's amazing. So as you mentioned, anthropomorphizing catfish is a very much feature of the Japanese earthquake prints also, as you can see here. And also objects, comprising a bird, as you can see on your right, is really something, very common to the Sanders
Absolutely
UFO here. And this bird looks like a phoenix, which is usually an auspicious symbol. But now it consists of objects or tools used by people who suffered in the earthquake. So there's a kind of irony here. And more irony is that this bird is stealing the catfish is a meal for the people who gained in the earthquake. So there are layers of ironies depicted here. So
they don't look very happy at all that their meal's being taken from them.
Yeah, no, of course. And speaking of anthropomorphizing animal, we found this is hilarious.
Well, geez, Graham Mackay from the Hamilton Spectator, nobody does it better by turning the former Prime Minister Stephen Harper into, well, I don't even know what to say that would be, a crazed octopusy sort of thing that is taking over the harbor in Hamilton and the GTA to demonstrate the cuts that were happening in the science industry during his government. And these people, this individual here, saying there's no logic to this madness, but we see it immediately as what it is, like big business, or in this case, government, is getting in and grabbing stuff. And they could have just had the prime minister, but for him to draw the prime minister as this beastie is just terrific.
Great. So people who see these cartoons immediately know what's happening from the visual, right? And then in Japanese prints also, as you can see, on the left-hand side, this is a parody of Treasure Boat. And on your right, you can see the typical depiction of Treasure Boat with 7 gods of happiness. But on your left, you know, the people on 7 people on the boat, Treasure Boat, is people who benefited from the earthquake, like carpenters or or reconstruction workers. And as you can see, the boat is catfish, and tree consists of money, and the mast is a damaged storage house, and even the waves are the roof tiles falling from the damaged house. So beautiful. Layers of parodies, but people immediately know what's going on here. So
you know, Akiko, it's unmistakable the beauty, the craftsmanship of the artist, who I must mention, from what you've told me, remained anonymous at this time, right. Unlike the modern era where the personality or the name or the reputation of the cartoonist has always been an important component. Would follow a certain individual and, oh, I want to see what they're up to. This studio was clearly a work of several individuals, but what craftsmanship. Look at the waves underneath the catfish, created by roofing tiles, clay roofing tiles, but it's unmistakable what they are. They're waves, and it's gorgeous, gorgeous artwork.
And then in the Western cartoons, do you see any example of like parodies like this?
Oh, geez. Well, it's pretty endless. It's you know, from the beginning of the West taking firm control over spreading ideas through satire, essentially taking what was learned in Europe to the New World, in this case, you know, United States and Canada. And I might add, some of the first cartoons ever made in North America were made in Canada, so we're quite lucky there. In this demonstration, though, Puck was an American satire magazine that was humongous in its day, and they're showing a couple of components here to aid the viewer in understanding the conundrum or the situation that would have accompanied a written essay. In this case, it's post-American Civil War, and you may have heard of the term carpet bagging. And here's a bag that was used to stuff carpets in at one time. And they use this term to describe powerful entities, business people who would come down to the South, who had lost the Civil War, and take advantage of the poor Southern people, in quotations. Beautifully represented here by Ulysses S. Grant, who was the president at the time and a former war general. And why is it showing off something important for us to see? He's wearing a Napoleonic emperor's cap. So that's the component that the viewer at the time would have said, oh, who does he think he is, dressed up as an emperor? And a lot of elements here were at play for the viewer to understand and get the idea very quickly.
That's very interesting to know. And have you found any like a direct comparison between Japanese prints and contemporary cartoon?
Well, as a matter of fact, yeah, it's, you know, there's no shortage of artists throughout the last several centuries. Once they started to understand Japanese artwork, and Japanese artwork would filter across to the West, endless artists, famously people like Van Gogh, and all of his contemporaries in painting were all trying to have a go at, oh, what can we pick from a Japanese design and to make themselves seem refresh and vogue. Very, very stimulating stuff in the Western canon. But our next slide is showing us a great combination of two looks at kind of the same thing, the winners and the losers. And as you can see on the right, we'll examine this, but this is a great piece of work from our friend Steve Brodner, but it's using all the components of this great 19th century Japanese art. All kinds of stuff going on, lots of things to digest here. And let's have a look at the Japanese cartoon first and foremost.
Yes. So these 2-sheet prints compare people who gained on the left and people who lost in the earthquake on the right. So who gained, like benefited from the earthquake, are basically people who worked on the reconstruction boom after the earthquake, such as carpenters, roofers, and plasterers. But at the same time, there's this, catfish print seller is included in the people who gained, which is very interesting. And the losers are those who are in the entertainment business or luxurious item maker, such as shamisen seller, kimono shop, or fancy restaurant or geisha, or actor tea masters. They lost in the earthquake.
And that's dreadful, dreadful stuff. Who wouldn't have wanted to have a tea, get a fresh pouch, go see the lovely geisha lady, and then see the monkey showman? What a ripoff.
Yeah, but in the chaos of the aftermath of disaster, people didn't really. And at the time, people believed that the earthquake was meant to happen to redistribute the wealth within the society. But after some time, the gap between these two categories of people widened. So this is the irony about that gap, social gap. So I think it kind of speaks to your cartoon.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Steve Brodner. What can you say about this guy? He's certainly one of the titans of the industry right now, because he'll combine a daily observation of what's happening in American politics, American society, global society. And even though he's in the United States, we as Canadians, we're keeping a very close eye. It's a global world now. We're seeing what our neighbors to the south are always up to. Because it's always a bit nutty. And Senator Manchin is the American West Virginian senator who's in the news, unfortunately, far too often, because he's one of these obstruction specialists, and he's a Democrat, but in name only, as they say, because he's always stonewalling on legislation that could be helping the Democrat Party move forward. And if you look off to the right, in the midst of the belching smoke coming from his lawnmower, are all the people that got him into power, all the MAGA people, all the people freaking out with their cell phones, and the lobbyists who are on their knees, like clamoring to get their hands on the clippings from his lawnmower, ripping up all the money. And on the left side are the voters, the progressive people who are against what he's stonewalling on, or I guess they're supporting what he's stonewalling on, unfortunately. And if you go to the top of the image, it's very funny. You see the president, the vice president looking down on the Koch family and all the nasty big business folks, and those creepy senators in the center, and Rupert Murdoch and his band of very unusual characters at Fox News spouting all their nonsense. But it's a direct modern day take on what was illustrated in the Japanese work. Just gorgeous, where you're just seeing tons of things to unpack. You're not going to just quickly glimpse at a piece of art like this, nor would you with the Japanese one. You'd be able to go through each and every little tidbit to sell the very important story. In this case, they're using the mansion as the metaphor for his story, essentially what's going on in his life and what he's up to. And it's just a remarkable piece of illustrative satire.
So satirizing rich people can be found in a Japanese earthquake print as well, as you can see here. People in Edo at that time believed that the gap between the rich and poor were like a sickness of the society. So when after the earthquake, rich people had to pay to reconstruct their houses, it was depicted, as you can see, like an excretion of money. Wow. And this money, the carpenters took them from the rich people. So this is really quite a satire about
Yeah,
the redistribution.
that's a very important way to sell the idea. That's for sure.
That's true.
Remarkably cheeky, pardon the pun.
Yes.
But I don't know. I was a bit surprised when we were turning the pages and you showed me these pieces, and I thought, well,
Yes.
okay, all right. I guess that's where money comes from. That's all I could think.
Yep.
It was very, very interesting.
Yep. And you mentioned about the influence of Japanese art to Western artists. And
Undeniable.
although this is not the earthquake print, but I'm just curious how this very famous image made by Hokusai, it's called the Great Wave, to the contemporary cartoonists.
Akiko, I'd compare this in a lot of ways with some of the other dynamite pieces of artwork that have stood the test of time, like the Mona Lisa or, Van Gogh flowers or paintings like that. So many people in the West know this print. They know the print from just seeing it in a museum or seeing it in magazines, seeing it all over the place. But it's become kind of a badge of honor among cartoonists to grab this image, repurpose it for modern ideas, and kind of take a crack at it. And these are just a few of thousands of examples of Hokusai riffs, and some of my favorites include the Cookie Monster, which is on the left. Oh, so sweet! You want to grab one of those cookies? It's just so charming, and these cats, this wall of cats coming at you, which for cat lovers, I think that would probably be a great time. And
yes.
And beside that beautiful drawing by Peter Brooks showing that nutty Prime Minister Boris in the United Kingdom, or just well, I don't know what to say. The one above it is just gorgeous. This is illustrating in no uncertain terms with plastic cutlery the problems facing our oceans with plastic contamination. Just gorgeous piece of exposition there. And at the bottom, can't say enough about our good friend Graham Mackay. He's flipped the side of it, but it's undeniably a Hokusai wave of senior citizens about to land on Stephen Harper and demonstrate the crisis that was that still is we're very aware of today, certainly post-COVID with senior citizens in Canada. It's very dramatic stuff.
I'm always amazed by the imagination of the cartoonists who took, the old Japanese image into all of these, variety of images. That's
absolutely
amazing.
I'd encourage anybody out there that is joining us that is interested in cartooning, have your own crack at it. Why not? There are undeniably times when using an image over and over again can be sometimes lazy if you don't put enough of your the key is to put enough of yourself in there, where you're using it as a jumping off point, and then you rub it into your magic hands and turn it into your own, and that's the way to do it.
That's very interesting. So let's look at the form of political or satirical cartoon. As mentioned, these Japanese earthquake prints were distributed as printed sheet by this seller. And how was in the West, like Europe and North America? Was it
amazing that at that time that this is, really this is undeniably the pre-magazine era, and where the print was, was very, very fashionable for a long time. In this case, an illustration from the master in England, James Gilray, with his main selling location. These would have been throughout Europe and all the countries. Each town would have had, or any of the prosperous towns would have had a printmaker, and the prints which satirized the powerful people of the day, as well as politicians or the foibles of the common man, would have been going up, and people would have, just like they were tuning into television, go to the window, like, what have they come up with? In this case, at Hannah Humphreys. And Hannah Humphrey, a really early, great, fantastic entrepreneurial success for women in Britain. The woman was she was the leading proprietor of satirical artwork. Remarkable that in Japan you had the hawker going out, here's today's prints, get your print on the what's happening, and people would rush to see what was going on. to get a print, whether it was a lower end print or a more expensive, prestigious print that they would get framed. But for people to take them home and to show their friends or to have it on their wall briefly, prior to magazines, this was how things were viewed.
That's interesting to know. And was there any kind of different types of cartoon for this printed sheet format?
Oh, geez, it was pretty endless, but undeniably, what scenarios that were poking fun at leaders and leadership, and a very fashionable way of doing this. Certainly is as old as drawing and printing has been around, is to use a map. And to politicize it, or to put social components of the day, what was going on, because that way, let's imagine in a lot of these maps, let's say on the bottom left, like, well, geez, in all of them, you're seeing the country, you're seeing perhaps the leader, in this case, whether it's leaders in Russia or in Western Europe. Often there's no way you could tell all those stories. You couldn't say, well, here's what's going on, and here's how many people are voting over there, and here's go at war with whomever. But in broad terms, you could very quickly go, this country does this country does that, and look at how naughty they are. And it clearly would be different from nation to nation, because if you were in Germany, you'd be like, oh, those horrible Brits, and the British people would be like, oh, those nasty Spaniards. And they would have a lot of fun, and the public who was buying these would be delighted. These started out just as prints, and they would be just like in the Hannah Humphrey store, but they transitioned to satire magazines. And in Britain, that would have been in Punch or several other magazines, and across Germany, it's just kind of endless publications that have now been lost to the vaults. But it's continued. This tradition has continued. If you look at the right, those are contemporary cartoons. We even have our own Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, above Mr. Trump there, as they're on the ocean and they're blowing their hot air onto Europe. Or this very charming Steve Bell cartoon at the bottom, where you see Mr. Macron from France, and above him are the British Isles, represented by, right at the top, the fuzzy blonde hair of Boris Johnson. And he always drew Boris with a bum for a face, and all the counties of Britain as various bum places, and of course renamed Bum Land. Fabulous.
Sorry, I can't help just laughing.
Very good, very funny.
Yes. Yeah. So yes, from printed sheet to magazine, and now today it's time of social media. So how the satire is changed, or
well, it has changed. There's no denying for 100 years or so or more, it's been the era of the newspaper. As I was coming up, it's all we could think about. Everybody I know, all my colleagues, oh, I got to get to work at a big newspaper. And as soon as everybody got a smartphone into their hand and a computer at their home, the method of delivery has changed. And what everyone has become accustomed to these days is, a lot of people feel that there's a democratization of satire, because anyone who can activate their computer and have Photoshop slam a photo together with some words, they can have it off onto Twitter or Instagram or TikTok or wherever you do your thing in seconds. When it's done with charm and with humor, I find it can be a lot of fun. Like this, what a better demonstration of the COVID lockdown than Kermit the Frog becoming a very plump Kermit. It's just beautiful. But of course, there's varying success with these things, and the images to the right are self-explanatory. And occasionally they're very funny, and everybody likes them when they're well done. But unfortunately, they can be done crudely, with intent to injure, and in the hands of less skilled individuals, they're eating up a lot of space on the internet. Unfortunately, we really have to be discerning about what we're looking at, and sometimes we have to wade through the goofy stuff before we get to the real gems.
I see. So, how would you see the future of satire here?
Well, I always like to stay on the glass half full side and say it's very, very strong. Our role, though, as people who get published in magazines and newspapers and online, wherever it is to encourage young people to get your ideas out there, whether it's like this or our preferred method, certainly, would be if you're drawing or you're animating something or you're making films, we'd like to see people questioning authority, getting their ideas spread as far as they can. Of course, I'm biased. I want to see people work on drawing. And to all the people out there that like to draw and have ideas in your heads, please keep going and please get your stuff online and submit to publishers. You know, there's so many good cartoonists and idea people in this country, and we need to make sure that the ones that are in high school right now know about it. If we go back to the time of Bush in the illustration there, the Symposium of Cartoonists, this was the turn of the last century, you can see the cartoonists clearly demonstrating their role. They're on the horse and they've got their cartooning pencil and they're shoving it into the gorgon or the dragon here as it's, you know, finding a way to make a criticism and a strong judgment of abuse of power, the politics and things. And I like these words, these shams or humbugs. We don't get to hear about the humbugs that often. So these are important things for cartoonists to remember. Get out there and fight those humbugs.
So would you like to end?
You know, well, I think it's an excellent way to conclude looking at this Akiko, this gorgeous Japanese artwork. And the idea that you discussed already about a bridge, and the things that link us together with the past as creative artists is something that most artists really, you know, hold high. We all have libraries filled with books of the various people through history who've inspired us to learn, become better draftsmen, to understand paint and color. And in that way, our friend Steve Brodner is showing us, just with this one illustration of the American White House during the era of Trump, how powerful satire can be, taking some very, very nefarious individuals to task on their bad behavior. And anybody in their right mind would sit down and go, well, I can see this is really not how you run government. And that's the essence. We have to stop. We can't let people get away with bad ideas. It's up to us in the creative drawing world to say, take a look, let's do some examining. And I can encourage everybody out there, pick up a newspaper, get out there and read books and look at satire being done. It's beautifully being done all over the world, all over Europe, all over Africa, all over Asia. There's lots of great stuff to enjoy.
Right. Thank you so much, Wes. You know, it's been wonderful talking with you. And then I was really like, you know, your energy and passion, you know, have made me think, oh, wow, this is a great world to,
well, you know what, it's thanks to you and the really creative, thoughtful people at the Royal Ontario Museum. On all the rooms, all the various parts of the museum are a delight for most of us who like history. But what you've done in the Japanese collection here with these cartoons, oh boy!
Thank you.
Get ready, folks. You're going to enjoy it.
So we have, let's look at the questions. We have a few questions already coming in. So, okay, do you recommend? Question to Wes: do you recommend any poets, authors, songwriters, podcasts for humor, satire?
Oh,
and any magazines, both old and current?
Okay, well, yeah, I guess they're both kind of asking the same thing. It really is. It's kind of endless, and one could just type in the word satire and get all kinds of stuff. But you know what? We could talk about a bunch, but I'm gonna talk about one, and that is the good and kind people at the Guardian newspaper in London. I don't know another newspaper on the planet that has podcasts, has very, very thoughtful writers writing about a wealth of bright ideas at the best of times. But geez, they must publish, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 different cartoonists on a daily or weekly basis at the Guardian. No other publication in the world does that. I mean, I could say Rolling Stone magazine at its height employed some of the best and brightest, including some of the people we've seen today. But the Guardian, to this day, they've got a wealth of really, really talented people, and I would dive in, folks, every day. Get a Guardian subscription and read along. And in Canada, you know, we have some terrific newspapers. The Globe and Mail has always got great things. National Post, interestingly enough, has some very, very good and funny cartoonists. And the Toronto Star, there's the Gazette in Montreal. they all have really, really wonderful artists.
That's great. Thank you. And also, anybody on social media to follow?
Well, social media, Instagram, I would say if you were to grab one person on social media, I would go to Instagram, and
Okay.
I would subscribe or follow Ron Hauge. And you saw that Ron was the guy earlier on during the presentation who drew the Donald Trump thing as a dictator. And Ron, fascinatingly, for, I don't know, 2 decades, was head writer at The Simpsons, the TV show that everyone knows so well. Prior to that, he worked for many years for the National Lampoon. And, you know, this is just undeniably one of the sweetest, most thoughtful guys. But he's also a genius cartoonist, and he didn't cartoon for a long, long time because he was writing for all of these cartoon shows. But every day, Ron puts out, not just one, he might do 3, 4 cartoons in a day. Remarkable. He's just he's, I think, the funniest guy out there right now. Ron Hauge, Hauge. Take a look.
Great. Thank you so much. Someone followed up. Gable in the Globe and Mail is fantastic. Do you know Gable?
Oh, well, isn't that sweet to hear? Brian Gable is a valued friend and an inspired colleague. He was one of those dudes who's been around for ages. Yet manages to look like he's 19, and he never has a bad word to say about anybody. But he's got a very, very cheeky pen. He never like is ruthless, but he won't let people get away with anything. Just a delight. And every opportunity you get to pick up the Globe and Mail, or even if it's going online to see. At the end of the month, they'll collect all the cartoons, and you can see what Brian's been up to. And I'm glad you said that, because he's a hero of mine.
That's great. Okay, next question. Which countries in the world are more or less tolerant of satire in cartoons about their countries, or what is happening?
Oh, geez, I think it's hard to say. You know, I mean, maybe to me, it's kind of obvious which countries are tolerant, and it's usually the countries that are practicing open-minded democracies are, for the most part, tolerant. When we see something that concerns us, and this happens across the board in every country of the world, we have cartoonists who are imperiled. There's a fine organization called Cartoonist Rights, and they are always finding ways to help cartoonists who are being imprisoned, cartoonists who are mysterious men arrive in the night and take them into a forest and break their hands, or worse. Cartoonists are in prison. Cartoonists are beaten and tortured, and some occasions being killed around the globe. And if you look at a country who starts finding ways to shut down their press, you're certainly seeing these problems in Russia right now, and you're seeing it wherever you're getting that whiff of fascism coming back into it. It's quite odorous in a lot of countries right now. These are the places where the press is getting stifled. And one of the first areas that they go to is attack the cartoonist, because the cartoonist is the one that takes a shot at the people in power. So the people, the common person, that's often their only chance to have anything to say against the powers that be, right, is through satire. And these people should be respected, and the opportunity to practice what they do should be respected at all times.
That's true. Okay, I guess one last question. Do you think in our current culture of quickly canceling people who have ideas that don't fit with the mainstream, that artists who do satire must restrict themselves?
Yeah,
for fear of backlash, perhaps?
Yeah, we talk about that a lot, Akiko. And I know it's popular right now because swings have gone both sides of the political spectrum very aggressively. Mm-hmm. As a cartoonist, I've always leaned towards the more naughty side of things. In that way, we would call it underground cartooning, cartooning that's not essentially for everybody. I was always a big fan of Charlie Hebdo, the magazine in France, where unfortunately a bunch of our colleagues were murdered by some lunatics. They were doing things that very clearly was offensive, because often it was not just poking at the people that govern us, in that case in French society, but the various religious leaders. And to a lot of people, the religion should be off the table. It should never be discussed, and you should never be mocking it. And I understand that a lot of people feel that way. I don't. I think it's fair game. But I do believe as a cartoonist, you have to have a certain level of you have to have some. You got to be able to have a barometer. You got to test the air. Go, okay, I don't want to govern my cartooning by what that person and that person are saying, but you should know when you don't go bananas. That being said, it's our job to constantly be a bit cheeky. Just know you have to have a little bit of common sense and know when to pull back. Sadly, there's some people out there that are like lunatic cartoonists, and there's a couple of them in the United States, and in essence, all they're doing is like shilling for people like Donald Trump, and in that case, they're propagandists. They're not satirists, because they're the people who in the 30s would have been saying Hitler's great cartoons, and that's just you can't be doing that. Whoever is in power, it's our role to be critiquing them.
But that is a very fine balance, right? So how do you find that balance, the line?
Well,
you talk with your colleagues?
Yeah, well, you talk to your colleagues, but it's a relationship that you would often have at your publication with your editor. And,
okay. Yeah.
And knowing this is our audience. For example, if you were drawing at the Toronto Star, for example, you wouldn't have illustrations of people having sex, for example. You would know enough to go, that's not something that is that our readership would find what they want to expect in our day-to-day thing. But if you would go, like I said again, to the Charlie Hebdo people, that is where that stuff is lying or laying, and that's what you want. You want an underground flavored publication, and they're very, very sophisticated in France, and that's something that is missed here. It's something that's not very well understood by North American audience. They don't recognize that level of satire as how we traditionally perceive satire here in North America, because it's so much more risque. People would say, oh, that's unbelievable. But we're a little bit more accustomed to it since the internet came around, where there's so much zany stuff all over the web. But traditionally, who your audience is, and when you've gone too far. But I understand that some bright people are getting into pickles, as they say, into a difficult position, because they put something out there and someone goes, you can't publish that, or even worse, you must apologize for that. And that's a tricky situation to be in.
I see. Very interesting and complicated world you are working on.
It sure is. Yeah, it sure is.
And then it's exciting too. Yes. But anyway, thank you so much for your insights and then interesting talks about all the cartoons.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure.
Thank you. So thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you again for our next digital program. Details of all upcoming ROM at Home online programs are available on the ROM's website and our social media channels. Aftershocks Japanese Earthquake Prints will be launched soon, so we hope that many of you will take the time to view it. Enjoy your afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you, Wes.
Thank you.